I found my grandfather's secret letter. Don't tell him about his real heritage. I said nothing for years. But at the family reunion, I made an announcement that left everyone calling me Frantically. Let me just say that family is supposed to be the one fucking place where you don't have to deal with lies and betrayal. Yeah, I was naive. It all started about 3 years ago when my grandfather Finn passed away. He was the one person in my family I actually respected. The man was old school but fair, and he always treated me differently than my cousins, in a good way. Always asking about my life, giving me advice, slipping me extra cash even when I was in my 20s. I should have known something was up. After the funeral, my mom Susan asked me to help clean out his house before they put it on the market. Of course I said yes. I mean, the guy practically raised me when my mom was too busy with her social life, whatever. So I'm going through his study, boxing up old books and papers, when I noticed this weird gap behind his bookshelf. I wouldn't have spotted it, except I dropped a damn pen and it rolled behind there. When I moved the shelf to get the pen, I found this hidden compartment in the wall. Like, who even has those in real life? This isn't some TikTok renovation reveal. Inside was a sealed envelope with my mom's name and my Uncle Chance's name written on it. The envelope looked old, like it had been there for years. I probably should have just handed it over without looking, but something felt off. My grandfather was the most straightforward person I knew. Why hide a letter? So yeah, I opened it. Sue me. What I read made me sit my ass down on the floor for a good 20 minutes just staring at the wall. I had to read it 3 times before it even made sense. The letter basically explained that I wasn't who I thought I was. My entire heritage, the one my family had claimed for generations, was a lie. My great-grandparents weren't from some prestigious European background like I'd been told my whole life. They were immigrants from a completely different part of the world that my family apparently looked down on. But that wasn't even the worst part. The letter detailed how my grandfather had set up a trust fund that paid my mom and Uncle Chance a substantial monthly check specifically to keep my true heritage hidden from me. There were conditions and everything. If I ever found out the truth, the payments would stop immediately. They were literally being paid to lie to me my entire fucking life. Suddenly, all these weird moments from my childhood started clicking into place. Like how my mom would get super weird whenever we had to fill out forms about our background, or the time I did one of those school projects on family heritage, and she insisted on helping me with the research, or how my grandmother Jennifer would make these offhand racist comments about certain ethnicity, apparently my ethnicity, and then give me this weird look. I sat there on my grandfather's office floor feeling like I didn't even know who I was anymore. But that initial shock quickly turned into something else. Pure fucking rage. These people, my so-called family, had kept me from my actual identity for 32 years. Because they were racist? Because they were embarrassed? No, because they were getting paid. I took pictures of the letter with my phone and put it back exactly where I found it. Then I slid the bookshelf back into place and continued cleaning like nothing had happened. My mom came in later, asking if I'd found anything interesting, with this weird look on her face. I just shrugged and said just books and old papers. The way her shoulders relaxed told me everything. When I got home that night, I ordered one of those DNA test kits. Had to use my friend's address because my mom has a habit of accidentally opening my mail. 2 weeks later, the results confirmed exactly what my grandfather's letter said. I am not who they told me I was. Not even close. Over the next few days, I went down a rabbit hole researching my actual heritage. The culture, the history, the language. All these things that should have been part of my identity that were stolen from me. Then I remembered Brittany, my ex-fiancée. We were together for 3 years before my family basically drove her away. My mom and Aunt Caroline were especially horrible to her, making these snide comments about her background and family. Turns out Brittany's heritage is the exact same as my real heritage. They didn't want me with her because they were afraid I'd discover the truth about myself. I broke things off with Brittany because my family convinced me we were too different. I chose them over her. And it was all based on a fucking lie. That night I drank almost an entire bottle of whiskey and rage scrolled far through old photos of us on Instagram. We looked happy. We were happy. And my family destroyed that too. Can you believe this shit? My entire identity, my relationship, everything I thought I knew about myself, all fake because my mom and uncle wanted their monthly checks. I didn't confront them immediately. That would have been too easy, too quick. No. These people took 32 years from me. They don't get to just apologize and move on. Instead, I started planning. I contacted a lawyer friend, without giving specifics, to ask about how trust funds work. Turns out, there are ways to challenge them, especially if they're based on discriminatory conditions. I started documenting everything, every racist comment, every lie, every manipulation. I also began learning about my actual heritage in secret, watching YouTube videos with headphones on, reading books, even cooking traditional foods when no one was around, all while pretending everything was normal at family dinners and gatherings, listening to Uncle Chance make his usual ignorant comments, watching my mom Susan and Aunt Caroline exchange knowing glances whenever certain topics came up. The family reunion was set for 6 months later. Everyone would be there. My grandmother Jennifer, who I now realized was the architect of most of this deception. Uncle Chance, who apparently helped enforce the secret. My cousin Braden, who I'm not even sure knows the truth. 6 months. That's how long I had to plan the most satisfying revenge possible. Something that would hit them where it hurt. Their reputations and their bank accounts. Because if there's one thing I learned from this whole fucked up situation, it's that my family cares about 2 things. Their social status and their money. And I was going to destroy both. Update 1. Thanks for all the DMs and support. Lots of you wanted to know how I handled the next steps, so here we go. After finding my grandfather's letter, I knew I needed to play the long game. These people had been lying to me for over 30 years. I wasn't about to confront them without a fucking bulletproof plan. The first weird thing I noticed was how my mom started checking in on me more often. Random texts asking what I was up to. Unexpected visits to my house. At first I thought maybe she was just grieving Grandpa, but then I caught her scanning my bookshelf one day when she thought I was in the kitchen, looking for anything that might suggest I knew the truth. That's when it hit me. She was worried I'd found something in Grandpa's house. I started keeping a fake search history on my laptop. Normal shit. Nothing related to my heritage. Meanwhile, I bought a cheap tablet that I kept hidden in my toolbox in the garage where I did all my actual research. Paranoid? Maybe. But these people had been playing me my whole life. Remember Brittany, my ex? After stewing for about 2 weeks, I finally worked up the courage to message her on Instagram. Just a casual, "Hey, how've you been?" Like I hadn't broken her heart 3 years ago. Surprisingly, she responded. We met for coffee. And I couldn't even look her in the eye at first. The guilt was too much, but I needed answers. When I finally explained why I reached out, that I'd discovered my true heritage matched hers, her face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Confusion, shock, anger, vindication, and then this weird sadness that made my stomach hurt. She confirmed everything. My mom and Aunt Caroline had made her life hell the entire time we were together. Constant comments about her family, her appearance, her cooking. My grandmother Jennifer had even taken Brittany aside at one family dinner and suggested she might want to find someone more suitable for long-term happiness, all because they were afraid she'd somehow reveal the truth to me. Can you believe that shit? These people sabotaged what might have been the best relationship of my life because they wanted to keep getting their monthly checks. Brittany had photos from when we were together, showing my family's subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, racism toward her. These would be useful later, but what hit me hardest was seeing us together in those pictures. We looked so fucking happy. The rage I felt hit different after that meeting. Before, it was the anger of someone who'd been lied to. Now, it was the fury of someone whose entire life had been manipulated. They hadn't just hidden my identity. They'd actively shaped my relationships, my choices, my future. I spent the next month doing deep dives into my actual heritage, YouTube videos about the culture, online language courses, Reddit communities where people shared their experiences. I even found this local cultural center and started attending events, telling people I was just interested in learning. Every new thing I discovered felt like something that had been stolen from me. Then came the financial investigation. I hired a private investigator, paid in cash, burner phone for contact only. Found out my grandfather's trust was worth around 7 figures, with monthly payments to my mom and Uncle Chance in the mid-4 figures each. For decades. Let that sink in. They'd gotten paid to lie to me for my entire fucking life. I also discovered something the letter hadn't mentioned. My grandmother Jennifer was the trustee, with full control over the funds. So she wasn't just complicit, she was actively enforcing this bullshit arrangement. Meanwhile, I was playing normal Harrison at family gatherings, listening to Uncle Chance's racist jokes, nodding along when my mom talked about our distinguished family history, smiling at my grandmother when she'd pat my hand and tell me how proud my grandfather would be of me. It was like living a double life, and honestly, some days it messed with my head. There were moments I'd look in the mirror and not recognize myself. Who was I really? The person they'd raised me to be, or this new person I was discovering? But then I'd remember how they drove Brittany away, how they'd kept me from an entire part of my identity, and the rage would come flooding back. About 4 months in, I had my first real breakthrough. Brittany introduced me to her cousin, who happened to be a legal intern. We got talking, and he mentioned something about discriminatory trust conditions being potentially unenforceable. I played it cool, but inside I was screaming. Later that night, I consulted with an actual attorney, different one than before, paying cash again. Turns out, trusts that enforce racist conditions can sometimes be invalidated, and if the trustee knew about these conditions and enforced them anyway, they could be personally liable. Now I had ammunition. I started documenting everything. Secret recordings of family conversations, legal in my state with one-party consent, screenshots of racist texts and emails, photos of family memorabilia that contradicted the fake heritage they'd constructed, bank statements showing the trust payment. I also started moving my personal finances around, opened new accounts at different banks, transferred assets, set up an LLC for my business that would protect it from any family drama. I wasn't just planning to expose them, I was preparing for all-out war. Around month 7, Brittany and I started dating again. It wasn't planned. We'd been spending so much time together with all this heritage research and revenge planning that it just sort of happened naturally. She got me in a way no one else could. She understood both the person I was raised to be and the person I was discovering. My mom noticed something was up when she saw Brittany's name pop up on my phone during a Sunday dinner. The look on her face, this mixture of panic and calculation, told me everything I needed to know. She immediately started asking about her, trying to be casual but clearly freaking out. I just shrugged and said we'd reconnected. The next day, I got calls from both my Uncle Chance and my grandmother Jennifer, suddenly very interested in my dating life. It was pathetic how transparent they were. By month 9, I had a solid plan. The family reunion was approaching, our annual 3-day gathering at my grandmother's lake house. Everyone would be there. It was the perfect stage. I spent weeks preparing my presentation, evidence organized chronologically, financial records showing how much they'd profited from hiding my identity, historical photos from my actual heritage that I'd collected, and the coup de grace, the original letter from my grandfather, which I'd gone back and actually taken from the hiding spot during a nostalgic visit to his old house before it sold. 2 weeks before the reunion, I met with another attorney who specialized in trust litigation. She confirmed what I'd suspected. I had a case to invalidate the trust based on its discriminatory conditions. Not only could I potentially stop future payment, but there was precedent for clawing back previous distribution if the recipients were aware of the problematic conditions. They could lose everything. The psychological toll of keeping up appearances while planning all this was real. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, heart racing, wondering if I was going too far. Then I'd remember 32 years of lies. I'd think about Brittany and how they'd treated her, And I'd remind myself, they did this for money. That's what it all came down to. Not love, not protection, not family values, just cold, hard cash. 5 days before the reunion, I went nuclear on the preparation. Brittany helped me rehearse my speech. I tested all the tech I'd be using for the presentation. I coordinated with a few members of the Cultural Center who'd agreed to show up as surprise guests to help me embrace my heritage publicly. I also made sure all my financial moves were finalized. New accounts secured, business protected, lawyer on standby. The night before we left for the lake house, Brittany asked if I was sure about this, if maybe there was a less dramatic way to confront my family. For a moment, just a moment, I hesitated. Then my phone dinged with a text from my mom, checking if I was bringing anyone to the reunion. I knew what she was really asking. She was worried about Brittany being there, still trying to control me, still trying to hide the truth. I looked at Brittany and told her there was no going back. These people had stolen my identity, manipulated my relationships, and profited from their deception for decades. They didn't deserve mercy. As we packed the car the next morning, I felt a strange calm settle over me. All the anger and betrayal were still there, but they'd crystallized into something cold and focused. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. The drive to my grandmother's lake house took 3 hours. Brittany and I barely spoke, both lost in our thoughts. As we pulled up to the property and I saw all the family cars already parked in the driveway, a single thought kept repeating in my head. In 24 hours, the family they thought they knew would be destroyed, and the person they thought they'd created would be gone forever. Update 2. Time for the finale. Buckle the fuck up. Pulling into my grandmother's driveway that day felt surreal, like I was watching myself in a movie. Brittany squeezed my hand as we parked between my Uncle Chance's oversized truck and my cousin Braden's sedan. My stomach was in knots, but not from nervousness, from anticipation. The first person to spot us was my Aunt Caroline. She was on the porch with a glass of wine. At noon, classic Caroline, and literally did a double take when she saw Brittany. Her face went through this hilarious transformation, surprise, confusion, and then this forced smile that looked physically painful. She immediately power-walked inside, no doubt to alert the others. By the time we made it to the front door, my mom Susan was already there, arms crossed, with that fake-ass smile she uses for Facebook photos. She hugged me stiffly and gave Brittany the coldest welcome I've ever heard. Behind her, I could see Uncle Chance whispering to my grandmother Jennifer, both of them glancing our way every few seconds. The first day was all about setup. While everyone was busy with reunion activities, I was strategically placing small recording devices around the house. One under the dining table, one in the living room bookshelf, one in the kitchen, where my mom and grandmother always gossip, all synced to an app on my phone. Overkill? Maybe, but I wanted to catch every reaction. That night, I made sure to act completely normal, laughed at Chance's stupid jokes, helped my mom with dinner, pretended not to notice how they were all treating Brittany like she had fucking leprosy. The whole time, I was mentally checking off my preparation list. The next morning is when I started laying groundwork. I accidentally left my tablet open on the kitchen table with articles about DNA testing visible. Then I mentioned casually how I'd been researching our family history lately. The way my mom and grandmother exchanged glances, priceless. They thought they were being subtle, but they might as well have been waving red flags. Later that afternoon, I asked my grandmother about some old family photos, specifically ones that I knew were fake or misleading about our heritage. Watching her stumble through explanation while maintaining her composure was both sad and infuriating. 50-plus years of practicing these lies had made her good at it. The big dinner was planned for the second night. Everyone would be there, all 17 family members, including cousins, spouses, etc. I'd coordinated with Brittany to have my surprise guests arrive just as dinner was ending. That morning, I woke up at 5 a.m., too amped to sleep. I checked my email to find confirmation from my lawyer that the trust challenge paperwork was ready to file first thing Monday morning. I also had a message from the private investigator with final verification on all the financial details. Everything was in place. As everyone gathered for dinner, I volunteered to say grace. This was unusual enough that it raised some eyebrows, but no one objected. My grandmother Jennifer looked pleased, probably thought I was finally embracing the family values she'd tried to instill. The meal itself was tense. My mom kept trying to dominate the conversation with meaningless small talk. Uncle Chance made a couple of his usual racist jokes, glancing at Brittany each time. My cousin Braden seemed to be the only one who noticed something was off with me, kept giving me these questioning looks. When dessert was served, I excused myself to get something from the car. What I actually did was set up my laptop and small projector in the dining room while everyone was distracted in the kitchen. When they returned, several people asked what it was for. I just smiled and said I wanted to share some family photos I'd discovered. As everyone settled back in their seats, I stood up at the head of the table, my grandfather's old spot. I started casually enough, thanking everyone for coming together for another reunion. Then I mentioned how Grandfather Finn's passing had made me reflect on family and heritage. The shift in the room was immediate. My mom's posture stiffened. Uncle Chance suddenly became very interested in his dessert plate. Grandmother Jennifer's smile became fixed and unnatural. That's when I dropped the first bomb. I held up my grandfather's letter, the original, not a copy, and watched as recognition dawned on my mother's face. She went so pale I thought she might pass out. I read the entire letter aloud. Every fucking word. The reactions were exactly what you'd expect. Denial, shock, my grandmother trying to interrupt, Uncle Chance attempting to laugh it off as some kind of misunderstanding, my mom looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole, but I was just getting started. I clicked a button on my laptop and onto the wall projected a timeline I'd created. 32 years of lies, documented meticulously. Family photos with dates, trust payment records, racist text messages and emails about Brittany and her family, DNA test results showing my actual heritage, everything. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a fucking pin drop. That's when I laid out exactly what I knew. The trust was worth 7 figures. They'd each received mid-4 figures monthly for decades. My grandmother was the trustee enforcing this racist bullshit, and they'd deliberately sabotaged my relationship with Brittany because they were afraid I'd discover the truth. I looked my mother directly in the eyes and told her I knew she'd checked my room after grandfather died, looking for signs I'd discovered something. I told my Uncle Chance I had recordings of every racist joke he'd ever made about my people. And I told my grandmother I had documentation of every time she'd enforced the trust conditions, despite knowing they were morally wrong and potentially illegal. The family dinner had devolved into chaos by this point. People were talking over each other. Some were crying. Others looked confused. AF. My cousin Braden's wife was recording the whole thing on her phone. Bless her messy heart. That's when the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. In walked 5 people from the cultural center I'd been working with, all proudly displaying elements of my actual heritage. I introduced them as my real family, people who had helped me discover who I actually was after decades of lies. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. This wasn't just an accusation anymore. This was public humiliation. Their precious family image, the one they'd protected with lies for generations, was crumbling before their eyes. But I still hadn't delivered the financial kill shot. I explained calmly that my lawyer had prepared documentation challenging the trust based on its discriminatory conditions, that not only would all future payments stop immediately, but we would be seeking recovery of all previous payments with interest, that my grandmother could face personal liability as trustee, that tomorrow morning everything would be filed with the court, and that it would all become public record. Uncle Chance actually tried to lunge across the table at me, but was held back by 2 of the younger cousins. My mom started sobbing about how they were just respecting grandfather's wishes, and my grandmother sat there, silent and stone-faced, probably calculating how much she was about to lose. I let them all melt down for a few minutes before dropping my final bomb. I'd already initiated a freeze on the trust assets pending legal review. The money they were counting on for next month? Gone. And, likely, gone forever. As we left, Brittany and I didn't say another word. We didn't need to. The destruction behind us was complete. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for and more. Within hours, my phone was blowing up. Texts, calls, voicemails. My mom alternating between begging and threatening. Uncle Chance promising legal action. Good luck with that, asshole. Various cousins either condemning me or quietly asking for more details about our real heritage. The most satisfying message came 3 days later. A formal notification from my lawyer that the trust was under official investigation, with all assets frozen indefinitely. My grandmother's personal accounts were also under review due to her role as trustee. They were financially fucked, and it was all completely legal. It's been 6 months since then. I haven't spoken to most of my family. The legal process is still ongoing, but preliminary rulings have been in my favor. My mother had to downsize from her McMansion to a 2-bedroom apartment. Uncle Chance is trying to sell his boat and vacation property, and my grandmother had to cancel her annual trip to Europe. Meanwhile, Brittany and I are engaged again. I've embraced my actual heritage fully, learning the language, connecting with that community, even planning a trip to visit my ancestral homeland next year. Do I regret going nuclear on my family? Fuck no. They stole my identity, manipulated my life, and did it all for a monthly check. They got exactly what they deserved. Some people call it revenge. I call it justice.